So if you follow me, this fancy webcam I have. So my new sign. So a little bit of a different video today. This channel, I've been going through showing my stuff, my equipment and whatnot, my studio, my guitars. Very cool. Building some of the things that I'm going to be using or putting things together or whatnot. But when I stand up and you see the ceiling that I have, I mean, look at this thing. This is gross. This white drop ceiling. So I'm about to embark on a project that's going to require me to sort of put everything in this studio under plastic and do sort of a nice revamp of it. So it'll have a much nicer ceiling in this place, which I think is crucial, and it'll be better for audio as well. So that's what I'm about to do. So I will also do one of these. We'll say that, and what I want to do today is look at my equipment that I used to own and I do not own anymore. So the reason why I want to do this is because I'm going to be going through all of my, different things that I use now. But there's a lot of stuff that I used to own that I don't. And some of it I wish I still had. Others I'm glad I got rid of. Everything that I have owned, I've put into my Reverb collection. And then if you get rid of something, you can archive it. So it's a good way to keep track of, like, just what you had and whatnot, if you go through a lot of music equipment like I do. It's a very nerdy feature to have on a website, but it's pretty cool. So I use it because I am a nerd. So let's just look at the categories here. I've got 47 items in my archive, 26 effects and pedals, 8 keyboard and synths, 5 amps, 3 electric guitars, 2 bass guitars, 2 pro audio devices, and 1 drums and percussion. But I actually had 2. I didn't put one of them in here. But let's start with, we'll skip effects and pedals for now because I have a pedal board that I will show. But let's go to keyboards and synths. So number 1, the Micro Korg. The Micro Korg is a classic, and it is a very cool synthesizer. And I actually had that for quite a while, but it ended up taking a dump and wouldn't turn on. So I ended up replacing it with the Micro Korg 2, which was a newer model that they released just a couple years ago. And basically it's very similar design. It's got like that center knob on it, and you had to like dial in the sounds by like using the presets, and then you could adjust these parameters and adjust them with this one. It was very complicated, very hard to figure out. The new one, however, was pretty cool because they implemented this like screen in the middle here, so you could select the parameter and you could actually see what you're adjusting. A little bit more hands-on. I think it's more focused for like modern music creators where they're used to using like digital audio workstations or whatever, where you're using plugins. Very similar feel to it. I thought that it just didn't have the meat that the original had. It didn't make as good of sounds, in my opinion. There was a lot more presets. You had twice as many presets that you could save. There was like bank A and B for all of these different things. And they also, let me see if I can zoom in a bit here. I can't. Where these presets were actually, the categories were genres, which didn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's how they did it. And anyways, it just really didn't do it for me. So I don't have either of the Micro Korgs, and I'm actually glad because I replaced that with the ASM Hydrosynth, which I still have, and I'll eventually do a video on that as well. And if you stick around through my endeavors here at the studio, you'll definitely hear it. I had a Behringer Pro 1, which is sort of like a Prophet clone. There was no keyboard on it, so it was a MIDI. You plug a MIDI keyboard in, you could control it that way, or a sequencer or something. But it just really wasn't my thing. It's a cool mono synth. So you have like Polysynths and monosynths are the two main types of synths that you're gonna run into. And monos, basically how they sound, you could play one note at a time. So you can't play chords and hold down multiple keys and play a chord. You could just do one. So they're great for bass lines or lead parts. They're really cool for like droning noises. So if you like hold in one key and adjust a lot of the parameters to make like these weird shifting sounds, it's really cool for that. But I have a Korg monologue, which is a mono synth that is my favorite. And if you listen to almost any song that I've made out of the 100+ songs in the last like 10 years or so, if it has a synth on it, it's most likely the monologue that's playing, because it's perfect. Like I said, bass lines, lead parts, solos, sort of droning noises, all the stuff that I like to use synths for. Monos are great for it. I'm a big Korg guy, if you can't tell by now. And then polysynths like the Microkorg and the Microkorg 2 and the ASM Hydrasynth, those are polysynths. So those are basically ones that you could play multiple notes at a time. And then it automatically categorizes these things in my archive here. So this M Audio key station, it was actually a 61 key, not an 88 key. But all this was is a MIDI controller. So there's a MIDI cable in the back. You could plug it in. And I would use this for using plugins in Ableton or whatever I was recording in, where you can load a synthesizer sound in, play it through that. I had an 808 drum machine, the boutique version that Roland made, so the TR-08. That was pretty cool. I ended up giving it to a friend of mine and don't have that anymore. And then I had this thing. This was a drone machine, and this thing was like handcrafted in Russia. They shipped it from Russia, and this thing was crazy. Like all these little switches were individual like oscillators that you could turn on, and all these knobs did different things. So you turn on the oscillator, it would play one note. So you turn on the different ones and mess around with it, and it would just drone and make this crazy sound. But the thing was so like half put together. Like every time I'd plug it in and turn it on, I'd get shocked. It was definitely a hazard, but it was fun to play with. I had that for a little while. MPK is just an Akai. It's a MIDI controller. It's sort of like this M Audio one, except it had pads on it. So you could map these knobs to do different things in your DAW, or you could, map these pads to do like finger drumming or whatever. I didn't really use it because it was USB only. I just didn't end up using it very often. And then I had an MPC one. So this thing was a hog. Basically what this does is it's sort of like a DAW built into a little box. So if you wanted to record music sampling, there's a lot of things that you can do with this. You can do it without a computer, which is pretty cool. It's sort of like a computer in a little box that you can record music to. One of the things I was going to try to do with it was take the stems of my tracks and upload them to this, and then I could basically perform the song with the stems in the MPC and play along with it. But it didn't really do kind of what I wanted it to do. It really wasn't made to use the way I was using it. So I ended up getting rid of that and getting something else. I actually replaced this with the Denon Prime Go, which is a DJ controller, which does a little bit more along the lines of what I'm looking for. So that's my synths and keyboards that I used to own. And I think out of all of these, if I could have any one of them back, it would definitely be the Microkorg, the original Microkorg. I might end up picking up one of these again down the road sometime, but basically, like, this is on everything. Look up any indie artist that's ever used a synthesizer, and they've most likely used one of these in the past. These things are just everywhere. They're relatively cheap entry-level synths, and they just have the coolest sounds. So if you're looking to find a polysynth that can do a lot of things, check that one out. So let's look at the amps. So right now, my amps are a Black Star Silverline Stereo Deluxe, a what do I have? Fender Princeton Chorus stereo amp, and I have my original amp when I bought my first guitar, which is a Marshall uh, MG30, I think. It's just like a little 30-watt solid state practice amp, which I kept. Those are the ones that I currently have, and this is my list of ones that I've gotten rid of. So this Orange Crush bass amp I owned for probably a week. I bought it from a friend of mine who wanted to get rid of it, and then turned around and sold it to another friend of mine who wanted it in a package deal with some other things, which I'll get to because another one of them was my favorite amp of all time. I used to have a half stack, so I had a Marshall 412 cabinet with a DSL 100 head. Um, this I bought right before I started playing live shows for when I did Without Winter project about 10 years ago. And I'll never forget one of the reasons why I felt so self-conscious about having a half stack was I think I was like at Guitar Center or some guitar store, and we were talking about amps, and I told them that I had a Marshall half stack. And he goes, "What, do you have a show at the Gund?" And that was like for those who don't know, the Gund is like the Gund Arena, which was the prior name of where the Cavaliers play basketball. So essentially, he was busting my chops, saying like, "What do you play in arena shows? Why do you need a half stack?" And it scarred me. But I kept it for quite some time after that, and sold it a couple years ago to some guy because I ended up getting my favorite amp, which I'll talk about in a second, which is also on this list. This Orange Crush I got from a friend of mine as well. Same friend that I got this one from, Big Bubba dude. And I sold this one as well. And here it is. So the JC120. This thing is definitely an opinion shared by others, not just me. This is the best clean amp that money can buy. And mine was from, I think, 1990 or 1989. It needed some servicing, so I got it serviced, got it rewired and everything, and it sounded phenomenal. And it's hard to explain kind of how these things sound unless you're actually like in the room with one playing it. But when you flick on the stereo chorus effect, it's mind-blowing. It fills the room and makes you feel like you're floating on a cloud. It's crazy. And with it being 120 watts, like this thing, you could barely turn it above 1, and it would blow your eardrums out. And I don't think I've ever put it above 2 or 3 because it's so obnoxious, even at 2 and 3, that turning it up any higher than that is crazy. And the only downside of this amp is there's really no good distortion. There is distortion built into it, but it's pretty terrible. But it takes pedals so well. It's just such a good amp if you're using pedals, because it's so crisp and clean that I always used pedals for my distortions anyways, just to dial in like different tones and whatnot. So this amp was perfect for me. Again, this is something that a lot of guitarists have used, and one in particular, the musician, I love. His band, not so much, but Wes Borland from Limp Bizkit uses a JC120 for his clean tones. And if you can, jokes aside, like listen to Limp Bizkit's guitar, and like the instrumentals are actually really good. And if you listen to the clean tones that he gets, they always kind of blew my mind because he plays really interesting, like in an interesting style, and he uses, when he does cleans, like different modulation and different delay effects and reverbs and stuff that I always thought were pretty cool. And I liked to do the same thing when I played clean. I would never really play a clean signal. I would always, if I was playing clean without distortion, I would always have some sort of like delay or something, like modulation as well, like chorus or something like that going on with it. And this amp is just perfect for it. And if you listen to some of those tracks, that's proof. Like It'll Be Okay is one of my favorite tracks by them, and it's just because Wes Borland's guitar is so dope. And yeah, if Fred Durst wasn't in that band, they would be pretty cool. But let's see. Let's see what else we got here. Uh, Pro Audio. I think these are just interfaces. Yeah. So, um, I had two interfaces before what I'm using now. Now I'm using a Mackie Onyx 12, which I've shown in other videos, but it's a mixer that has USB on it as well, so it acts as an interface. So if you've ever recorded music at home, you probably know how annoying it is to have to unplug and plug in every instrument that you want to play, especially if you're somebody like me who's playing multiple instruments and you get an idea for another part and you have to unhook everything and hook up the new instrument to it. It's the worst. And I've always done that, and it's just how I thought things, how you do it. When I switched to this mixer, it's amazing. Everything's hooked up, ready to go. All I have to do is move the slider up to turn it on and start playing. You can map all 12 inputs on the mixer to different channels in your DAW, so you can swap between inputs there. It makes everything super convenient, and it's got a built-in preamp, which kind of gives like a nice vintage tone to things. It's got 48 volt power, so you can plug a mic directly into it. It's definitely the way to go, and it's got a built-in EQ. It's just it is the way to go for sure. But before I was using that, I used a Scarlett 2i4 was my first interface, and then that ended up dying after probably 8 years or so. So I got a Scarlett 8i6, and I still have that. But one of the other interfaces I had when I was streaming last year or the year before that, I just had a microphone plugged into a single, mono input. So these Universal Audio Volt ones are nice because it's only a single XLR or 1/4 inch in, so you can only do mono signal, which isn't great for music recording because sometimes you do have stereo signal, like if you're doing a synth or if you're doing stereo effects with a guitar or something like that. But for just doing like vocals or your voice, especially like streaming where you just have a mono input and you're using like, your device, like your computer's audio, it's totally fine for that. And one of the things that was cool about it is this orange button right here. It was a vintage button, and you click that in and it basically sort of emulated like a vintage preamp to give it sort of a little bit more warmer tone. So again, when you're streaming and you're not really running everything through audio editing and everything to make your voice sound cool, it's just another nice little convenient trick that you can use to make your audio sound a little bit better. So it was a good fit for that purpose, but I do not have that anymore, unfortunately. And then a few years ago, did a podcast on Midwest Coast, and what I used, there was, always usually a couple of us doing it at a time, and this was essentially like a small mixer that's built for podcasting. So it had 4 different inputs, so we could all kind of talk and I could mix it in real time. But it also had Bluetooth connectivity, so you could call people and it would send that signal through to what you're recording under. Had little trigger buttons where you could trigger like sound effects and stuff like that. So it was a pretty cool little thing to have. If you're into podcasting, definitely a nice tool for sure. But that's it really for some of the pro audio things. Drums. This was the kit that I've had for the longest time. It's an Alesis DM10. I bought it new back in like 2016 probably. I just got rid of it a few months ago, and now I kind of wish I had a drum kit. So one thing I've never owned is a real like acoustic drum kit. So I think that I've earned the right to buy myself one at this point, considering that music is not a phase, Mom, but it's something that I've always done, and like I feel like, it's like one of those things where you like don't want to buy one because you're not sure if you're going to use it, but it's just like I'm always going to be dicking around doing music stuff. It's just like I've come to realize who I am as a person, so might as well just give it a shot. We'll see. But I had this one, and I also had an Alesis Nitro. It actually wasn't mine; it was my wife's. But don't have that anymore either. So definitely have room for a kit, whether it's electric kit or an acoustic kit, but I'm leaning towards getting an acoustic. So guitars. So this is interesting because I still have a lot of guitars, and this one that's on here, this first one on the list, technically I still own it. It's just split into two different guitars. So this is a Squier Affinity Telecaster. This is the one that I showed a couple weeks ago, I think, where I used the body of it to put the neck on, and then I replaced the body as well. So technically the guitar like doesn't really exist anymore in that form because none of the parts are on that guitar. But the neck, so let me just clear this up. When you swap like necks onto different guitars, the soul of the guitar is the neck. That's what you're like tactile, like playing, and your hands are on. Like, I know that all the other components in the body, like the pickups and everything that actually makes noise, is really in the body, but the soul is the neck. So, like I said, when my example was my first guitar. If I take my first guitar and I have the neck and the body, and I split those up, and I put a different body on the neck, and I put a different neck on the original body, which one do I consider my first guitar? And it's the one that has the neck, because the neck is the soul. That's just the way I see it. And the way I look at the rest of it is like all of those things are replaceable. The pickups, the other internals, the pick guard, the body even, like that stuff is all kind of replaceable, but the neck is the neck. You know what I mean? The body is a little bit different, just like the actual wood of the body, but anything modern that's got like a poly finish, like who cares really? It's all kind of the same thing. But yeah, the neck is what you're holding, and that's what you're playing. That's what you're breaking in. That's just like, that's the guitar in my eyes. So the actual neck off of this guitar is on another guitar that I built that a friend has that was a Squier Bullet Strat. And back in the day when they made Fender Bullets, they were basically like Strats, but they had sort of like a telly neck on them. So I used an actual telly neck from a Squier and put that on that Bullet Strat body with a single P90 in the bridge, and that's his guitar now. So maybe one day I'll do a video on that guitar, but I don't technically own it, but it is one that I put together. So that's why I consider this guitar a previous own, because the neck is gone. This is the only Les Paul that I've ever owned. This is an Epiphone Les Paul Nightfall. So I bought this right before I started playing shows with Without Winter, and I actually used it quite a bit. My friends and I were talking about some of those shows and whatnot, and we were looking at some old pictures from shows that we played, and I was surprised to see how often I was playing that guitar, like while we were playing sets. And my memories of that guitar was that it sounded really cool, but it was super uncomfortable to play. I'm not like a Gibson person. I'm definitely more of a Fender person, as you could probably tell from well over half of my guitars are Fender. But yeah, I just never really got into the Gibson thing. They're too expensive, and the headstocks break all the time, and they're just kind of like unbalanced. Like the neck dive on the Les Paul is crazy. Like every time you let go of it, you're just constantly fighting to hold the neck up, and it's just not fun. It's like one more thing to think about when you're trying to remember how to play a song. You're trying to remember the words. You're trying to sing in key. You're trying to play the right notes. You're trying to like communicate non-verbally with the other people you're playing with. And there's 400 things going on at once when you're playing on stage. And one less thing to worry about is trying to fight the neck to hold the guitar up, which you don't have to really bother with Fenders and Strats. So I've always been a Strat guy. So yeah, wasn't a huge fan of it, but it did sound cool. But I have an SG now, and that one does feel a little bit more balanced. It's definitely more lightweight than this one was. And you get kind of the same sounds out of it. Like they're very, very similar in the way that they sound. One other interesting thing about this particular Les Paul is it had passive EMG pickups in it, and it also had a Floyd Rose bridge, which I'm not a big Floyd Rose guy. They're kind of a pain in the ass to set up and change strings, tune. Like they do stay in tune pretty good, but I never really used like whammy bar or tremolo or anything like that, so it was kind of a waste for me. But it was cool to have. I do have one other guitar now that has a Floyd Rose, which I definitely will do a video on that because I bought some new pickups for it that I'm gonna swap out. And then this one, I did a video on this already. This guitar was super special, the Fender Noir Edition Stratocaster. So out of those, I thought it said more than 3, but yeah. Out of those, if I could have one back, obviously I'd pick that Strat because the thing was just an absolute hog. But yeah, let's look at the basses real quick. So this Ernie Ball Music Man, it actually wasn't a Stingray, it was a Sterling. It gets kind of confusing because Ernie Ball made the Sterling by Ernie Ball or Sterling by Music Man or something like that. It was sort of like the Squire of those guitars, so it was like a cheaper model. But they also had a model called the Sterling, and it was a pretty expensive, very nice, active bass. A lot of famous bass players play these. Different types of Music Mans, like Flea played one for a while. If you just look it up, there's tons of other people. I can't even think of any right now, but I don't really like active basses. When I bought it off my buddy with the orange amp, I had thought that I might be interested in keeping this bass because I wanted to get a new bass, but it just wasn't for me. It sounds like sort of when you think of like the Seinfeld slap bass sound. That's what it sounded like to me at all times, and it's just not my thing, so I wasn't a big fan of it. And then I had this bass for a long time, but I had a white Squire jazz bass that it was an Olympic white one. I had the little stripes on the pick guard. I had the black headstock that I put on there with the logo and stuff. I really liked that bass. The jazz bass is very similar to the Fender Precision basses or Squire P basses. The difference is jazz basses have 2 pickups and there's no switch. They're all knobs, so you can kind of blend the 2 together to get really interesting tones. And also the neck is super thin, like towards the headstock, which is very cool. I really liked the feel of it. But I decided that I wanted to get a new bass, so I ended up getting rid of this. So all of these things, the JC120, the orange bass amp, and my old bass all went to my friend in the same deal. And yeah, the only thing I asked was give me first dibs to buy it back. So I guess I can look at it like I pawned it or something. But yeah, that's all that stuff. And then pedals. So this part, I feel like, is probably going to take a while. But I've had 2 main pedal boards, basically 2 iterations of pedal boards that I used throughout my music playing career. So these are going to be all out of order. So I'm going to try to remember my first pedal board just off the top of my head. So it went into a Ernie Ball wah, into a Dan Electro tuner, which I ended up replacing with a Poly tune, which I still have. And then it went into this MXR Dynacomp compressor. And then I went from the compressor into, I think, a Behringer tremolo pedal. And then from that, I don't remember the exact chain, but I know that the Boss DS1 distortion was on there. and then I had this full tone, full drive as an overdrive pedal. And then I had a Boss. Well, first I had a Behringer digital delay, and then my friend gave me a Boss DD6 or DD3 or something, I think, to use. Basically a Boss digital delay. So I used that. I had a CE5 chorus ensemble, so a Boss chorus pedal, which I really liked the way that like John Frusciante used chorus and some of the Red Hot Chili Peppers stuff, so I bought the one that he used. And then my last pedal, the coolest pedal I had off this board, was this one right here, this Digitech Supernatural. This was like an ambient reverb pedal, so you could get really cool reverb sounds, very lush sounding reverbs. And this was back in like the early 2010s when I got this, so it was like super high tech back then. But nowadays, I mean, the effects pedals that are out today are just insane compared to like what was available then, with the different things that they can do, and all these boutique companies that are making these crazy pedal designs, which I had a lot of those on my next iteration of my pedal board. So that's what I used for a long time. And then I kind of purged all of my pedals, and I was using a lot of effects in my DAW to get some different guitar tones and whatnot. But then I went to my second iteration of pedals, which is the pedal board that I've had most recently. And that one was insane. So I will go through this list, and I might not even use this part of this video, but so I want to pull up an actual picture of my pedal board, but I'm not on my MacBook, so I can't access my iPhotos, so I can't show it on the screen right now, but I could probably do it in post. But basically, the chain went from actually no, I'm just gonna go through these. So OBNE Dark Star Stereo is one of the sickest reverb pedals I've ever heard, and this is one of those ones that are one of those newer boutique kind of pedals that just are blow every old pedal like out of the water with the way it sounds. Nothing that I've found can like recreate the sound that this makes, and all it is like a reverb with, it has some like pitch shifting built in, and also like a bit crush or distortion built into it, and it's just like, it's such a cool sounding pedal. I think it's the Pedal Zone who makes a video on this that kind of does like a deep dive on it and goes through the sounds it makes and stuff, and it like, watching that video just sold me to buy it immediately. So I would check that out if you're interested in that. Watch his video. He also did one on the Red Panda Raster, which is a crazy digital delay, and this thing is so versatile. It's basically like a regular digital delay pedal that you can crank to 1 billion, and you can get the craziest sounds out of this, reversed loop delays and just all kinds of nonsense. You can make completely unlistenable things with this, and you could also make like really cool, pretty delay like chaos, and it's pretty awesome. These are all the pedals I had on my old board. So go to page 3 here. So the Rat, I mean, the Rat's a classic. Everyone uses those. Game Changer Plasma. This thing was a freaking sick, like, crazy distortion where it basically has like a tube of plasma in the middle, and you can adjust the voltage with one of these knobs, and that's what's actually creating the distortion sound. So you can see like the plasma going back and forth on like a bolt of electricity basically in the center of the pedal that's purple while you're playing. And so when you stop playing, it turns off, and when you play, it's like you can watch yourself playing notes on it. Super, super sick. I just didn't really use it that much, but I actually kind of wish I would have kept it because it was a very unique distortion sound. It sort of sounded like a fuzz pedal, but it just had a different feel to it. And because it was based on an actual voltage, it had a natural noise gate. So if you weren't playing loud enough, this bolt wouldn't go through, and it would just cut your sound entirely. So it was very cool gated distortion, which if I was looking for a gated distortion, I would buy this in a heartbeat. So this is definitely something to look into for sure. The SF300 Super Fuzz, this is like the ultimate fuzz pedal. You can buy these things for like $30, and it gives you a gnarly, like better distortion fuzz than like a lot of the super expensive boutique pedals will. And like the best thing I can say is, like, if you ever listen to Electric Wizard or like even Black Sabbath and stuff, you can get those kind of like vintage fuzz tones with it, and it's just super sick. So super heavy. Bang for buck wise, this is definitely number one on the whole list for sure. The Boss SY200 is a synthesizer pedal, guitar synth pedal. So basically what it does, it takes the input from your guitar and it converts the sound to a synthesized recreation of the notes that you're playing. But what was cool about this one was it was polyphonic. So a lot of those synth pedals, if you go to play a chord, it'll completely break down, cancel each other out, and you'll get terrible sounds out of it. But this was able somehow to pick up multiple notes at once, and you could play chords and it would emulate synth chords. It was very cool. But one of the things with this is it was all preset based, so it had tons of presets available, and to sort of dial in sounds you wanted, you had to adjust those presets. And it was just a little strange, and like it was very, very cool, and I thought I would use it a lot, but to play like some of the synth parts of songs that I've done, but use a guitar to do it. But there was only like a few sounds out of all the 100 plus presets that were on here. There's only a few that I thought were usable or sounded good. So in the end of the day, with how expensive this pedal was, it just wasn't worth keeping for what it could do. So that's why I got rid of that one. This tape delay, it was nice. It's just a regular JHS3 series, but I got rid of it because I got a different tape delay that had some other effects built into it, which I'll get to on this list. But it ended up breaking, so that wasn't necessarily the best investment. And then the LA2A Teletronics Universal Audio compressor was what I was using for a compressor on that board. And actually, I really liked this. It was a very nice, clean, crisp compressor that was easy to dial in kind of what you wanted to do. A compressor on a pedal board is more of a feel thing than it is a sound thing. It's kind of hard to tell just by listening like what it's actually doing, but you can tell when you're playing the effect that it has. And yeah, I like this one way better than the MXR. The MXR I could never really dial in to get it to feel right, and this one was really, really easy to do that. And then finally, these are some of the bigger boys. A hologram microcosm. So if you don't know what this pedal does, just look it up. This thing is batshit insane. But again, it was very complicated to figure out how to use, and I just didn't really feel like spending the time to dive into it and dissect it all and figure it all out. And it's really hard to actually get it to do something that you want. It's a very cool creative tool. So I think it would be cool with a synthesizer, which I never really tried. But to make like ambient sounds and kind of like create things with, going into it in the mindset of like you're creating something new and not really having an intention, it's cool for that because you discover a lot of cool sounds with it. But they're almost impossible to recreate. And yeah, it has a lot of cool features. It's got like granular delay built in. It's got like, reverbs built into it. There's timing based things. There's a looper built in. It just does so much, but it's also very expensive. And just this pedal alone could fund, another guitar of mine. So that's why I ended up getting rid of it. This is the DSM and Humboldt Simplifier Mark II. So essentially what this is a complete pedal, an amp and a pedal. if you ever use things like a Helix or some of these amp modelers, they have direct outs, DI outs that you can plug directly into like front of house for playing shows, so you can play guitar without an amp essentially. And this had that, which was what I was looking for like a DI box, but it also has analog amp modeling built into it. So there was a preamp model, and then there was cabinet sims, and there was a send and return. So the way I used this pedal was I had all my mono effects up front, so all my distortions, like the synth pedal and everything, going into this, hitting the preamp, so getting like a little bit of breakup, sort of like a subtle overdrive, like a more natural guitar tone than just straight clean, if I had all the pedals turned off. And then you could crank it too and give it some natural distortion, which was cool, like almost an amp sounding distortion. And then it had a send, which I would send to my stereo effects loop, and it had a stereo return. And so I'd return back to this pedal, there's built-in reverb on this as well, and then hit the cabinet sims, and then have a direct out. It had line out, so you could plug it into an amp if you wanted to. It also had an auxiliary in, so I could, you could plug in, and it had a headphone jack too, so you could plug in like an MP3 player and headphones and use your pedal board and play along in the headphones, which was cool. And I thought I would use this a lot for like practicing at home and stuff, and I'd be able to take that same setup and play it. But I ended up not even using that pedal board at all to perform, because I decided I wanted to do something like I'm doing right now, which is making these videos and building out a studio and playing music in my own studio, because that's where I feel the most comfortable playing music, and that's where I have the most fun playing music. And when I do something, like if I record a song and take a video of it and put it on YouTube, it's there forever, as opposed to playing a show that I stress out and get stage fright for, and causes me immense amounts of anxiety and stress and nervousness to put in 20 hours of practice to play a 40-minute set or less, 30-minute set, 20-minute set that maybe 20 people are at, and probably maybe one or two of them are actually paying attention, and then it's gone forever. That seems way less enticing to me than doing it from the comfort of my own home at my own speed and not stressing. So anyways, the Walrus Audio Canvas 15 was the power bank I was using. And the only reason I bought this is because it has a cool like multicolored stripe on it, which fits what type of design I like. So I got that. And it also did a really good job of what it was. So highly reviewed, sort of expensive for a power supply, but if you need 15 power units, then this is a way to go. This NUX or NUX or whatever this is called, the tape core, this is what I got to replace that JHS 3 series delay. And I got this because it had a micro looper on it. But again, it lasted about, I don't know, a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then it stopped working randomly. So don't have that anymore. This Universal Audio Astra, this thing, first of all, look at it. It's sweet looking. And this is basically like every modulation built into one pedal. So it has tremolo, it has chorus, it has flanger, and the coolest thing, what I used it for, was it had a doubler. So there's a pedal that TC Electronics makes called the Mimic, and it essentially is just a doubler pedal. So a sound that someone, I guess, used doubler a lot would be like Dimebag Darrell and Pantera did it frequently. He had like a rack-based one. But the effect it does is basically take your guitar signal, and what the name says, doubles it. It sort of modulates the second signal a little bit, so they're not like perfectly in sync, so they're not canceling each other out. So it creates this very wide effect that it sounds like you could play one guitar and it sounds like there's multiple guitars playing. So if you're listening to guitars on, any recorded song and it sounds huge, and even if it doesn't sound huge, most of the time you're not listening to one guitar track being played. You're listening to multiple, and all those layers are stacked on top of one another. And that usually is the tone that you're hearing when you're listening to like a recorded song, and why it's so hard to reproduce when you're just sitting here playing guitar, because you're usually listening to like 6 different guitar takes stacked on top of one another. So using a doubler kind of gives you that option to be able to kind of emulate that effect live. And that's what I used this for the most, was using the doubler effect. But it was cool to be able to switch it over to the chorus or switch it over to the tremolo or something. If I wanted that effect too, it was there. So that was a cool like universal modulation pedal to have. This one, this Maris Hedra, so this thing, I actually almost kept this because this does something that nothing else can emulate. And what this actually is a, it's like a pitched delay. So it's a delay pedal that you can pitch up and down the delays that are, the chain of delays that are happening. But it's got a couple cool quirks built into it. One of those is hard tuning your delay. So you can set the key, like if you're playing in the key of E or F or C, whatever, you can set the key on the pedal, and then it'll make sure that the pitched up or down delays are in that key. So it always sounds good, because if you're not using pitch locked, pitch shifting, sometimes it can go out of key and sound a little strange. So that was pretty cool. But one of the tricks with this is you could set the delay time to 0, and you could turn the dry signal completely off. So it was only playing the affected guitar signal, and put that hard pitch on. And it basically turned it into an auto tune for your guitar. So you could set it to C and do that. And you could play any note on the guitar, and it would be perfectly in pitch with whatever key you're playing in. So you could just sit here and play whatever note up and down the thing, and it would sound like you're ripping a crazy solo that was perfectly in tune. And that was a cool effect. And then it also has an expression pedal input. So the key range was 2 octaves up and down. So what you could do is you could set the expression pedal to adjust the pitch. If you hard tuned the key and did that with the expression pedal, you could play one note and push the expression pedal in, and it would play every single note in scale up to 2 octaves up and down. So you could play one note, push it in, and it would do a full scale, like a full sweep. So it was definitely cheating when it comes to like, faking skill, but it was just so fun to play around with. And that was the reason why I bought this pedal, and it did do it, and it did it awesome. But again, it's another pedal that's very hard to figure out how to do all that stuff. I mean, all those things I just mentioned, all those different features, you have to set all that stuff by using 6 knobs. So you can imagine that it's not necessarily the easiest thing to figure out how to do. And there's like different banks. So you push one of these pedals in and you twist knobs and it does something else. So very hard to like actually set and adjust. And if you were using a couple pedals and this was one of them and you took the time to learn how to do it, I'm sure you'd probably get used to it and it wouldn't be an issue. But when I did what I did, and you buy 15 pedals at once basically and try to learn them all at once, it just gets too overwhelming, and that's what happened. So the pedal board I was using was this pedal board, or Pedal Train Novo 24. So it's a pretty big one. It's basically 2 of these bars are one height of pedal. So you had 1 row, 2 rows, and then like a half row up here. Some of the pedals I had, like the Game Changer Plasma, was taller. So having that was nice, because it was like sometimes would take up 3 of these slots. So I crammed 15 pedals on this, and it was pretty much filled to the brim. But yeah, what else do we got here? So, these are some floaters that I had. I never really used these on my pedal board, but this is from like the previous iteration. I had a full bore metal MXR pedal, which is basically like a metal pedal. That sounded terrible, to be honest. I wouldn't recommend this one. This Devi Ever Vintage Fuzz Master. So this is just another fuzz pedal. Again, it's a little bit more expensive because it's a boutique brand like Devi Ever, but it sounded cool. But honestly, just get the Behringer SF300. It's a third or less of the price of this one, and it sounds better. It's true bypass. This one was not. So even if you had this pedal off, it still sort of affected your sound a little bit. So I never could get a good clean tone when I ran this in my board. So I actually really never used this for anything really, other than just mess around when we were jamming. And then that's the Behringer tremolo I had. So that's all my pedals. And basically the only one I still have is the Digitech Freak Out, which is a it's like a feedbacker pedal. And the reason I kept it was because it does something pretty unique where it will take basically the parent company of Digitech. I forget who it is, but they own a speaker company. I don't know if it's like Klipsch or JBL maybe. I think it's JBL actually, but I'm not really sure, so don't quote me on that. But anyways, they're the speaker company that they own developed a technology to cancel out feedback, so you get really high quality audio. So what was interesting is they took that same technology and basically reversed it, because the way it worked was it would isolate the feedback and cut it out completely. This pedal isolates the feedback and boosts it, and you can also set it to be like, you know, the just the natural feedback tone. You can go to the fifth harmonic and like do all kinds of different sounds with it, and it's just super cool. And I kept that because the Helix rack unit that I got basically replaces all of these pedals I used to have. It does not have, or did not have, any feedbacker option like that. And because it's not an actual amp, which is how I used to generate feedback, we just shove the guitar right in front of the speaker and it would generate feedback. Since I wasn't really sure if I could do that, I kept that pedal. But then Line 6 added a feedbacker effect, which does similar things to the Digitech one. So basically, that's why I ended up getting rid of all my pedals to begin with, was because I bought that Line 6 rack unit, and it, like, you know, replaces almost all of these. There's a couple things, as I've mentioned, that these pedals do that the Helix can't do, but for the most part, you can dial in something pretty close. So I've just been using that, and I think, you know, if I ever would go back to like playing in a live setting, I would probably just go the modular route, because you can get close to what you want to do with a modular. And I'm not like a tone snob kind of guy that's like, you know, you have to play a tube amp or you're not real, you know, you're not a real guitar player or whatever. I don't think that, and I never have thought that, because, you know, just do what you like to do and what makes you happy. And I like digital effects, so that's just who I am. And yeah, like, it's more about creating something new and different and unique than it is, I think, being like true to, you know, tone and having natural, real, analog, tube-based distortion. That's just my 2 cents. So, but this is coming from a guy who plays, you know, my favorite amp is JC120 and using effects. So depends on what you like, I guess. But anyways, I guess the moral of the story is I used to have a lot of shit and I don't have anymore. And there's a reason for all of that. And out of all of these things, like I said, there's a few things that if I could have them back, I think the number one thing that I would bring back to my repertoire would be the JC120. But since I'm using a Helix, it has a JC120 amp model built into it, so I can get pretty close to that without having the 80-pound amplifier to lug around. So it's a good trade-off in my eyes. And all these other effects, same thing. I would say the most unique out of all of these, the two that kind of stand out in my mind are the Game Changer Plasma Distortion, because you can't really emulate that sort of sound, but it basically is a fuzz. So I can get pretty close to the same sounds with like a fuzz effect that's in the Helix. And then the other thing is the Maris Hedra, because there's nothing that any other pedal can do that's like what the Hedra does, and there's definitely nothing on the Helix that does anything close to that. So that's what I would say. And yeah, now that I got this out of the way, something that I've wanted to do, sort of like a clean slate. You know, now that I'm making these videos and I'm going to go through all this stuff that I own, I just wanted to go through and be like, you know what? I'm starting here. This is what I got. This is all crap I used to have that I never did a video on. So at least I got that out of the way. And the next one, doing a studio upgrade, and then we'll get back to like doing some of the guitars I've built, and yeah, get into like actually playing some songs and doing some music, doing some more fun stuff that I have in mind. So I'm having a lot of fun making these videos. This is a very long video, so I'm going to try to cut this down a little bit maybe, but yeah, I don't know. It's probably boring too. I mean, it's just literally just me sitting here talking about guitar equipment without buying any of it, but I'm a nerd, so that's what you get. But anyways, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be back next Saturday with another vid. So